I wanted to address, perhaps a little bit more responsibly and fully, Jeffrey's comment last time in the post-game show, where he mentioned that Rav Amital, Zichrono Livracha, had indicated that there's a healthy measure of humility that a person is meant to have regarding attributing cause to the Holocaust. And so I wanted to try to work through my thoughts on the matter and why I feel that why the answer is important. The answer is important. Maybe by way of introduction, imagine for a moment that there was somebody who was a prodigy, a tremendous talent, let's say a pianist, just a gifted, talented pianist. And they were at a crossroads. And he could either pursue and bring into the world his musical gift, which requires, let's say, 6 hours a day of focused practice and learning, studying, etc. And he feels that there's another alternative, which is to place his whole talent and his gift on the altar of his desire to study Torah. So he's making this decision, and the decision is obviously a big decision, and he decides one way or the other. So each one carries with it a lot of implications and meaning for him. Does he pursue his gift, or does he set the gift aside, so to speak, put it on the altar in favor of maybe a higher value in his life of studying Torah? Those are both decisions that I don't think anybody can sit and judge from the outside. But what if he would respond with a shoulder shrug? Yeah, I don't know, whatever. You say that's not an answer. Shoulder shrug is not an answer. You have this tremendous gift. You're considering the possibility of pursuing it or offering it up on the altar, but a shoulder shrug is not an answer. And it's in fact, on a certain level, it doesn't just trivialize, it's offensive, because the gift is a tremendous gift. Putting it on the altar is a tremendous decision, and a shoulder shrug trivializes it and is offensive. So what we need, and that's the muscle. If you think about that and you try to apply it, Kadosh Baruch Hu brought something very large into the world, made a big statement, a very large, big statement. So a person could say, I don't know why, but it causes me to tziter, it causes me to stand in awe and in reverence and in fear of the Malchus Shemayim. What a big statement. A person could say, this is why it happened, and this is what I'm going to work on correcting. Those are both legitimate. Maybe they're very big statements, but they're both legitimate. But a shoulder shrug is not. I don't know. Who can know? Nobody can know. Whatever, and nobody can know what's going on. Nobody can know. You can't know. So So just move on, because you can't know anyway. That is not only trivializing, it's offensive. And I think that that walks directly into what the Rambam says when he says that if people will not respond to a tzara that comes to the tzibur, and he'll say it's a whatever, harezu derech achzorius. That's cruelty. The cruelty is a whatever. A whatever means I don't need to take stock of my relationship with Hashem in light of what has happened. I don't need to take stock. Again, this does not mean that a person may or may not know the specifics. But if a person does not call out and take stock, then it's going one step beyond just being trivializing and offensive. The Rambam calls him cruel. So the basic, then the first, the first premise in relating to the events that we're exposed to now, or relating to the Holocaust, is first of all, I am not going to trivialize. I am not going to set it aside. I'm not going to consider it to be, it's unimportant. I have other things to deal with. I have other things. I have more important things to deal with in my life than to think about the tragedy. That's not an answer. That's a shoulder shrug. And that is on every level trivializing, it's offensive, and the Rambam calls it cruel. So when we're going forward and we're asking about the tziduk hadin, about how do we relate to Hashem's intervention in the world, whether it's the current intervention or it is a past intervention, it behooves us to take it seriously. Nobody should walk away from a mention of the word Holocaust with anything but humility. It's a humbling experience, which means that we don't blame. That means that we don't strategize. That means that we don't get angry. And we don't say if only. We don't do those things because we're Jews. We're not Goyim. Goyim do those things. They get angry, they strategize, they blame, and they say if only. That's what Goyim do. It's not what a Jew does. What a Jew does is he encounters Tziduk Hadin in a full and robust encounter with the Ribbon Shalom. Whether he's able to detect or not able to detect the specifics of what needs to be corrected, he approaches it with that hachna'ah to the Ribbon Shalom. So that is something that everyone has to agree on. There is no room for a dissenting opinion on that, on this statement. There could be different opinions and different views, different understandings of what the person is meant to do. But look at it from a little bit of a closer standpoint. When something happens in a person's life or in the collective life of Klal Yisrael, it is as if a Musar Sefer was just opened up in front of the person. Musar Sefer just flew down off the shelf and was opened up in front of the person. So different people can take from the Musar Sefer what they feel they need to focus on, where they need to prioritize, what they feel that the Musar Sefer is saying to them, and they can strive to grow in whichever area they feel that this speaks to them. But imagine that the person says, well, oh, this Musar Sefer, this was printed in 1794 on this kind of paper and with this kind of typeface. There's another one from 1755 that has a different paper with a different typeface and the binding, and you say, what? What did you just do? The Musar Sefer just opened up in front of you in a compelling event that is every event. The good events and Chas v'Shalom otherwise are a Musar Sefer that opens up. Musar Sefer regarding a good event opens up to the pages that require a person to be modeh, to acknowledge the rachamim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When it opens up regarding something that was not positive, then the person has to look and see which page speaks to him, but don't talk to me about the binding. That's not what the story is about. The story is not about the binding. The story is not about the type of pages or the typeface. The content is critical. And I think it's that I am most motivated by in going back to talking about Savta's stories. I think what motivates me more than anything else is take it seriously. It is not just a history book. It's not just a collection of stories. It's not just a bunch of horrors. It is an intervention, an extreme intervention that Hashem intervened into the world. So the idea that one person cannot necessarily feel at liberty to point fingers at somebody else, I think within reason, if the person is reasonably historically on the mark, I could see the person having different walkaways. Interestingly, Chazal were never comfortable leaving a catastrophe without asking why it happened. So they did, and they pressed, and they did, and they pressed. It so happens, regarding the Holocaust, this all really happened already. It's the Purim story. There's no difference between the Purim story and the Holocaust. It's exactly the same story with one difference. In the Purim story, they responded to the call of Mordechai to do tshuva, and in the Holocaust, they did not. But the Gzeira was the same. The players were the same players, the same people, it's the same story. This is what the Purim story would have looked like had the people not responded the way they did, of Kiyamu v'Kiblu Aleim, and reaffirming their connection to Torah, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Chazal are unambiguously clear that Ein Puranus Bo La'olam El B'Shvil Amei Haaretz. And it tells a fascinating story. The Gemara in Bava Basra at the beginning, as many are familiar with, the story is that there was a fine that was imposed on the Jewish community of Tveria. And the Rebbe, who was the Rav of Tveria, said that he's exempting the Talmidei Chachamim from this fine. So the Amei Haaretz came to Rebbe and said, why should they not participate together with us? And he said, no. So they said, well, in that case, we're leaving. We're going to leave. We're going to dump this fine. We'll leave it on your lap. And he said, so go. So half of them went. Arku Palgehon. Half of them left town. So the king cut the fine in half. So the other half came to Rebbe and said, no, so the Talmidei Chacham should participate together with us. He said, no. So they said, oh, in that case, we're leaving. So he said, so leave. So they all left, except for one koves. There was one cleaner who were Shadua koves. So the entire fine, the king placed the entire fine on this one koves. So he ran out of town. When he ran out of town, the king canceled the whole gzera. Now, what's the story that is trying to be told here? What are Chazal trying to communicate? That it's not a question of who's to blame and who's not to blame. It's that the Am Haaretz in each of us, the part of us that is not submitting to Hashem's Ratzon and to the Torah, that doesn't have to be that it's this one or this one or this one. It's the part that exists in each of us is what triggers misfortune in the world. And we need to recognize that it is that part that needs to pay the price, needs to pay the piper. It's not the part that is loyal. The part that is loyal is not subject to this penalty. The part of us that is not loyal is going to be subject to the penalty. So you say, well, in that case, I'm going to storm out of here with the part of me that is not submissive. And the answer is, by all means. By all means, find the door. By all means. So that's a message of how we are meant to relate to Puranios. So I don't think that we need to struggle over the fact that nowhere else in the world up until that point, until the Pittsburgh platform, nowhere else in the world was there an open declaration of the fact that we no longer are yearning for a return to Zion. We no longer believe in a messianic deliverance. We are no longer identifying ourselves as a separate nation. We are going to become like all the nations. Now, I'm not running the show, but Hashem wrote in his Torah that if we defect in that way, there will be the Holocaust. It is explicitly, unambiguously described that if there is going to be wholesale defection, there will be the Holocaust. I don't even understand why people struggle with this. This was written, it was predicted, it was never hidden. Jews have been reading it twice a year, over and over again for thousands of years. If there is this defection, this is what will happen. And they defected, and this is what happened. It almost seems like bizarre to be surprised. So again, it's not my job to open up the Musar Sefer for anybody. I don't need to open up the Musar Sefer and say, this is what you or you or you should be working on. The Musar Sefer is wide open. Let each person find the role that they need, so they can overcome the part of themselves that is derelict, the part of themselves that is not loyal, that is not subservient. That's something that every person has to do for themselves. But the idea that there was a mass dereliction and that the clause of the Tochacha was activated seems to me, how could it be otherwise? This is what was described, and this is what happened. So again, it doesn't mean about blaming anybody. It means about a robust tziduk hadin, where we're not standing with our jaws dropped and saying, how could this have happened? Where we're saying, okay, you said that this was what was going to be, and it was. and this is what we did, and this is what you did, exactly as you predicted that you were going to. The other point, and I want to make this the Gemara in Bava Kama Daf Nun, Amr Reb Chanina Kala Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu Vatranhu Yivatru Chayav Shenemar Hatzur Tamim Pa'alo Kichol Derachav Mishpat. That means that whoever says, Rashi says, a Vatran, you don't have to worry about your Averos. You go to that little booth and you confess and you'll take care of it. It'll be all be taken care of. Whoever says that a Kadosh Baruch Hu is a Vatran, so Yivatru Chayav, Rashi says, Yufkeru Chayav Vigufo Shemore El Habrios Lachto. He became a Christian. He decided, you just go, you confess. I don't know, you do some little good works, whatever it is that you need that the priest tells you to do, and everything's taken care of. Well, who took care of it? Oh, we have an intermediary, and he's a vatran. He lets everything go. So when that is in the air, when there's this Christian air that we're breathing of vatronus, that if you just either do a confession or, I don't know, give some charity, whatever it is that he tells you in the booth that you need to do for so how many Hail Marys you need to do, so that infuses into the world a spirit of vatronus. And the spirit of vatronus, it erodes everything. The Gaon says on the words, Ki imcha haslicha leman tivarei. We believe that Yiras Shamayim is dependent on the fact that Hashem forgives. Because if we thought that he didn't forgive, which is where the Christian world went, then we had to make up the idea of Vatronus. And so we infuse the world with Vatronus. You don't have to infuse the world with Vatronus. There's a thing called tshuva. And Hashem is soleach. Do tshuva. Correct the wrong. Do tshuva. And Hashem will forgive you. That's built into the system. But they didn't believe that. And so they created a system where they needed to infuse the world with Vatronus. And Vatronus is the worst thing you can do. There's nothing worse than saying it's okay. Hashem and I, we got this thing worked out. And I just want to leave you with one last thought from the Meshech Chochmah. The Meshech Chochmah is a fascinating Meshech Chochmah written well before the Holocaust, where he makes reference to the fact that people were referring to Berlin as Jerusalem. And he makes the following case, and I'll just make it in a brief moment. He makes the case that from day one, from the time of the Avos, when they knew that there was going to be a long Golus, they set up a system of keeping Klal Yisrael separate, of not having Klal Yisrael be a member of the dominant culture. He doesn't make reference to it, but I'm sure it's obvious. What does Yosef say to the brothers? He says, I'm going to bring you to Paro. And when he asks you what you do, tell them you're shepherds. Because they hate shepherds. Just listen to the tzlil. Listen to the tone of those words. Tell him you're a shepherds. Because that's a to'eva to Mitzrayim. They hate shepherds. Well, so I think the modern sensibility would be to find some way of soft shoeing that. Say it some way that doesn't trigger that response. And the answer is no. That's exactly what we need to do. We need to keep Jews separate. It's the only way we're going to survive the Gullahs. And so he's making the case that a Jew is not a Frenchman. He's an Ivri. A Jew is not a German. He's an Ivri. A Jew is not an American. He's an Ivri. Jew is not an Israeli. He's an Ivri. That the idea of us blending into some national identity that is other than being an Ivri is unimaginable. There's a medrash that says that Moshe Rabbeinu asked Hashem, I've been schlepping the Atzmos Yosef all of these years, decades. I've been dealing with Atzmos Yosef, and he's going to be buried in Eretz Yisrael. Wouldn't it be appropriate that I should at least be buried in Eretz Yisrael? And the Medrash says that Hashem responds to him, Misha hoda ba'artzo yikaver ba'artzo. Misha lo hoda ba'artzo lo yikaver ba'artzo. You missed a little bit in your sense in the centrality of being an Ivri, of being an Eretz Yisrael dik, of being attached to this piece of land. You missed it. Why? How do you know? Because when the Benos Yisro said, Ish Ivri hitzilonu miyada, Ish Mitzri hitzilonu miyada roim, you didn't protest. And when 1Sep24 said, Ish Ivri hevilonu letzachek banu, he didn't protest. He acknowledged. He said, well, he acknowledged because he was born in Israel. He was an Ivri. I was born in Mitzrayim. There's an identity. A Jew is an Ish Ivri, no matter where he is, no matter what, no matter how. And if he hears himself being called a Mitzri, it should. No, wait a second, you got me wrong. No. I'm an Ivri. I never stepped foot in Canaan. I was born in Mitzrayim. I went to Midian. That's Misha hoda ba'artzo yikaver ba'artzo. Misha lo hoda ba'artzo lo yikaver ba'artzo. There is a person needs to know, no matter where he is, no matter what he's doing, he has to always maintain the sense that he's an Ivri. And he's never a part of the national flow of the world around him. He may function in that world, but functioning in that world is not to become one of them. And the Meshech Chochmah was seeing in his time the extent to which those who were declaring Berlin to be Jerusalem, the extent to which they were slipping and precipitously slipping into an amalgamation, into feeling as though they were primarily Prussians, they were Germans, and they were no longer an Ish Ivri. They were no longer separate. And that is something that can never happen. And I think it's fair to say, without looking so deeply, it screams in every line of Savta's story, which is that when this was going on, the Goyim came and they made a tremendous separation. There's the old quip that when we make Kiddush, they don't have to make Havdalah. But we don't make Kiddush. We're not Mekadesh ourselves, so then the Goyim make Havdalah for us. And they separated from everything, from absolutely everything. There was to be no mixing whatsoever. And you say, isn't it strange? Why is that such an agenda issue? And the answer is because it was exactly that separation that was being trounced on. So again, just in summary, I think that the point is well taken, that to point to a specific Aveira, certainly to point to an Aveira of a specific person, is something that is totally above our pay grade and not something that anybody should even indulge in. But the idea that Hashem said something very profound, he said a big statement, and that everybody is required to pause and to consider the implications of that statement. And nobody is allowed to give a shoulder shrug of, who knows, it's all Hashem's, we just defer and I'll go on with my life. That's the point that needs to be declared like out of bounds. That's not what we're going to do. We're not going to simply shrug our shoulders. And I think that I wanted to get back onto this subject in order to be able to clarify to the extent that we can, that when a big statement is made, it is not an acceptable answer to shrug our shoulders.